나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 Hi everyone, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Welcome. I'm pleased that you're here, proud of your practice. I hope that you're healthy and safe. We're now going to get into the latter part of Nichiren's writing on an outline of all of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. And as we've been outlining so far, Nichiren has been outlining the four doctrinal segmentation of the teachings, an academic as well as a historical separation of the ideas and thoughts, the cumulative training, if you will. We're now going to begin to dovetail and bring these four doctrinal ideas, groups of ideas, into the 5 periods and demonstrate in this 5th period how all of these things resolve into one, the central point, the essential practice, the way of self-manifesting Buddhahood. Yeah? So, the title of this next portion is the Pre-Lotus Sutras in the first 4 of the 5 periods. It's a summation again of the summations with respect to the Lotus Sutra. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? We now continue with a discussion of the 5 period classification. The first period is the period of the Flower Garland Sutra, a period which concludes with the Brahmanet Sutra. So if one wanted to, one could create a flow chart here with the headings of the doctrinal and the 5 periods, and say the first period contains all of the sutras from this first one, the Kigan, to this Brahmanet Sutra. That's the first period of teaching. Okay? The sutras expound the distinct and perfect teachings. So that's interesting. The first period contains teachings which are seen in the third and fourth doctrinal containers, definitions of the teachings in their entirety. Interesting, right? Not the first and second. Let's continue and see how that affects the whole picture here. The second is the period of the Agama Sutras, whose ending sutra is the last teaching sutra. So one would assume beginning with the Brahmanet and ending with the last teaching sutra. These sutras expound the Hinayana doctrine of the Tripitaka teachings. That's the second period. The third is the Hodo period of various Mahayana sutras, such as the Sutra of the Accumulated Treasure, the Sutra of Meditation on the Buddha of Infinite Life, Amitabha. The time when they were preached is not known definitively. The concluding sutra of this period is the Bodhisattva Necklace Sutra. The sutras of this period expound all of the 4 teachings, namely the Tripitaka, common, distinct, and perfect. The 4th period is that of the Wisdom Sutra. Those whose ending sutra is the Sutra of the Benevolent King, these sutras expound the common, distinct, and perfect teachings, but not the Tripitaka teachings. There's a hard line there. The one we spoke about before, with the Shravakas, Pratyekabuddhas, the Arahant being a very accomplished student, but still completely mired in an idea of self. Very stuck. Ichantika even. The Flower Garland Sutra, was expounded during the 37 days following the Buddha's attainment of enlightenment. There are different, scholarship varies a little bit here, but 37 days isn't very long. A lot of them say 2 or 3 weeks. Basically, the Avatamsaka Sutra volume, I've read it. It's a huge volume. Very flowery, long, involved names. The English language at that time was a very singing, performative, you would say, language that used many, like a song, many descriptive, adjective-like labels for things, and combining those labels to describe conceptually something more specific, ironically. But that's what we do, even in English, right? If we want to get to the minutia, to make sure we define something absolutely with as little variation as possible, it requires more and more words, adjectives, parameters, so on and so forth, yeah? So you have these, I swear, you would have, and the Avatamsaka, most books with that many pages are printed in a format where the print is frustratingly small. And yet many of the names, Mahasattva, would go on a particular, remember I'm always talking about personages as captured by personal names, proper names. And these naming conventions could be sometimes more than 2 sentences long. A word, a name, I should say, not a word. And that's just, I mean, that's a very minute part of it. What I'm pointing out is that if the names were that long, then the language describing what enlightenment is like was extremely verbose. And I can picture in my mind these 5 remaining disciples looking at Shakyamuni and thinking, huh? Yeah? So I'm sure you can just picture the situation. Is Siddhartha or Shakyamuni at this point trying desperately to convey the amazing realization he'd just made, the shift of mind and perception, and looking at his students with great compassion to say, "You can do this," and looking at them and going, "Wow, I've lost you completely. I'm not helping you at all." And I've said this before, I think, and this isn't documented anywhere, it's just an impression I get from my own study. He had to have thought to himself, oh crap, I didn't get here overnight. I'm trying to teach these people I feel a deep affinity for, how to attain something that it took me 6 or 7 years of super determined, almost self-annihilating practice to finally come to this realization. I don't want to force them to go through the same horrors that I did in order to get here, but they're going to have to learn some step by step. They're going to have to be, now that I know there's a goal, I'm not as desperate as I once was. In other words, the risks I took were very life-threatening. He almost starved himself to death, yeah? So I'm sure as he looked with compassion upon his students, his disciples, those who would listen to him, I've got to make them this promise of this place that they can't possibly understand, while at the same time using their current facilities, their current capacities, their current inculcated cultural story, conceptual knowledge of the human experience, and use it to transcend it. In much the same way as you would teach a child to walk. You'd sit them up. You'd let them hold your fingers and hold them up. You want to get them on their feet, but you're slow and careful about getting them there, knowing full well that once you get them on their feet, they're going to be excited by watching you, by seeing what you've done, by seeing, and they'll bounce up and down to test it. Wow, I'm holding myself up here, taking ownership of that ability, and then finally risk emulation, walking, right? Think about those steps. They're critical. And so this is how Shakyamuni started to teach Buddhism. Okay, let me back up a step or two, and let me teach you from what you already know. You can get here. I promise you can get here. Okay. Right? And then he starts teaching. But what he's teaching isn't enlightenment. He's teaching the mind and preparing it for this great leap, this great shift, this paradigm shift of how to use one's mind, how to perceive one's relationship between mind and body, environment, and slowly nurture a greater understanding, a more holistic understanding, a more powerful understanding of one's existence within the whole, eventually to see it as a non-separate thing. It takes a lot of mental work to get there. And this is the story of the teachings of Buddhism. So, here it says, he taught this Avatamsaka Sutra for 37 days. The Agama Sutras were expounded during 12 years after the Flower Garland Sutra. So that's how long he felt he had to spend with the people of the day. 12 long years, slowly progressing them toward enlightenment. And he wasn't done. It's just that after 12 years, he made another shift. Let's go further. You can do it. So after 12 years of expounding all of the Agama Sutras, the Mahayana Sutras and the Wisdom Sutra were expounded during the 30-year period after the Agama Sutras. The following 30 years of his life, he taught all of these other sutras, the Vimalakirti, the Lankavatara, so on and so forth. Right? Thus, it took 42 years to expound the sutras from the Flower Garland through the Wisdom Sutras, the perfection of wisdom, right? All of those really focused on Bodhisattva, the mind shift of the Bodhisattva, really getting them close. Scholars and monks on Mount Hiei believe that it is not certain when and where the Hodo Sutras were expounded, and that it took 30 years to preach the Wisdom Sutra. Scholars and monks on the Onjoji Temple at the Onjoji Temple in Mei believe that the Hodo Sutras took 16 years to preach, while the Wisdom Sutra took 14 years. So whether in what proportion these various steps of Mahayana, you can go look at charts online. They take it sutra by sutra. How accurate those can be, you can already tell from the Nichiren's description of the Four Doctrines that they crossed over a lot. The main difference being context. Yeah. According to the Great Wisdom Discourse, the Buddha left home at the age of 19 and attained enlightenment by 30, or at age 30. The Nirvana Sutra says that the Buddha devoted 50 years of his life to expound the Dharma. So 30 and 50 adds up to 80, right? Furthermore, it is said in the Sutra of Infinite Meaning that the Buddha expounded the pre-Lotus Sutra for 42 years. It's explicit in the preamble to the Lotus Sutra, right? By considering what it is stated in the Nirvana Sutra and the Sutra of Infinite Meaning, it is clear that the Buddha took 8 years to expound the Lotus Sutra. The Nirvana Sutra states that the Buddha spent 50 years of his life preaching the Dharma, while the Sutra of Infinite Meaning asserts that he expounded the pre-Lotus Sutras for 42 years. 42 from 50, 8. Between the two, there remains 8 years, confirming the timeline of the Buddha leaving home at 19, attaining enlightenment at 30, expounding the Dharma for 50 years, and entering nirvana at 80. So all checks out. The teachings expounded for 42 years in the pre-Lotus Sutras were all expedients designed to lead people to the Lotus Sutra, the Sutra of self-practice. We know this because the Sutra of Infinite Meaning says, quote, I sat under the Bodhi tree for 6 years to attain enlightenment. Though I expounded various expedient teachings to guide people, I did not reveal the true Dharma for 42 years or so. The expedient teachings expounded for 4 years or so are the Agama Sutras, which I expounded first to teach the doctrine of the Four Noble Truths, of suffering and the way to nirvana. I then expounded the 12 types of scriptures of the Hodo period, the Great Wisdom Sutra, and the Flower Garland Sutra, while in the Ocean Imprint meditation. So this is the pattern he went through in his own meditation. Personally, I think that the order in which the Buddha preached was the Flower Garland Sutra, followed by the Agama Sutras, the Hodo Sutras, and the Wisdom Sutras, the Lotus Sutra, and finally the Nirvana Sutra. To rank them in the order of profundity in doctrine from superficial to profound, it should be the Agama Sutras, the Hodo Sutras, the Wisdom Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra, and the Lotus Nirvana Sutras. So it is stated in the Lotus Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra. So interesting, as he's putting them in order of profundity, you notice how the first teaching, the Flower Garland, is the one just prior to the Lotus. Why do you think that is? That's not chronologically when he taught it. That was the first thing he taught. But that teaching was basically, hey guys, think of your mind thinking this way, thinking from this perspective, from Buddha-ness. Think about how that works. Let me tell you how it works, what it does, how it affects your life. And it just blew people's minds. They couldn't get it. So he had to back up and teach the Agama and then the Wisdom, right? And then, after all that, the Flower Garland Sutra would have started to maybe gel for people. But still, it was too much an immediate vision. It still wasn't a way for, it was like an exhortation for you to awaken. But it doesn't say, do this and awaken. The do this part is what was missing all along, as far as enlightenment, right? This is the Lotus Sutra. Okay, now do this. This is the unlocking of the mental state to experience Buddha-ness. This is the entire Lotus Sutra is based on this act, this self-volitional act. for a potential that's been there all along. But describing the potential early on, right off the boat, you might say, it was too much too soon. The Kigan, or flower garland, or Avatamsaka sect was founded on the Flower Garland Sutra by such monks as Chi Yin, Fat Sang, and Cheng Quan. The Kusha, Jojutsu, and Ritsu precept schools were founded on the Agama Sutras by such monks as Fa Pao, Pukong Quang, and Dao Xuan. The Hoso, Dharma characteristic sect, was founded by Tripitaka master Xuan Chuang and priest Tsuin on such Mahayana sutras as the Sutra of the Rebirth of Maitreya up in the Tushita heaven, right? The Sutra of Rebirth of Maitreya down in the Saha world, the Sutra of Becoming a Buddha, and the Revealing the Profound and Secret Sutra, or on such commentaries as the Yogacara Bhumi and the Theory of Consciousness Only. The Sanran, Three Discourses sect, was founded on such sutras as their commentaries as the Wisdom Sutra, the 100-verse treatise, the Middle Doctrine, the Treatise on the 12 Gates, and the Great Wisdom Discourse by Grandmaster Qianxiang. Of course, it doesn't mention here that the 100-verse treatise, the Middle Doctrine, and the Treatise on the 12 Gates are all attributed to Nagarjuna Bodhisattva. The Kigan Flower Garland sect sees the Flower Garland Sutra as equal to the Lotus Nirvana Sutras, regarding them both as the perfect teaching, while viewing all other sutras as inferior to them. You could see how that would be possible in retrospect. Once you've learned enough, you can see the relative statements being offered in the Avatamsaka, an experience of what the Lotus Nirvana Sutras are describing, or however you want to. They're not that far apart. And so it's not unwise that they kind of group them together, right? Yet, though there are arguments from the various sects, it is obvious there are arguments between the various sects. It is obvious that no sutra is superior to the Lotus Sutra when comparing them the quality of sutras. It is therefore not a good idea to use the opinions of Buddhist priests in China and Japan to compare the qualities of sutras. They all seem to be self-motivated primarily. Even though they may make some valid statements, they all contradict one another. Nobody can seem to agree. Everybody wants theirs to be the best. They're not objective enough. This is what Nichiren is saying. So that brings him to this next chapter, the Lotus Sutra of the fifth period. Where are we time-wise? Oh, we're doing great. The Lotus Sutra of the fifth period consists of one facile of the Sutra of Infinite Meaning as an introduction, 8 faciles of the Lotus Sutra, and 1 facile of the Sutra of Meditation on the Universal Sage Bodhisattva as the conclusion, bringing the total number of faciles to 10. The reason for my commentaries on the 4 teachings, Tripitaka, Common, Distinct, and Perfect, and the 4 periods, Flower Garland, Agama, Expanded, and Wisdom, is to help others learn what the Lotus Sutra is. For one cannot correctly understand the teachings of the Lotus Sutra without learning the pre-Lotus Sutras, although one may study the pre-Lotus Sutras without learning about other sutras. That statement alone was a great concern of my own, because of my early exposure to schools and sects of Nichiren's thoughts were that you shouldn't look anywhere else. Only study Nichiren. Only study the Lotus Sutra. And man, alarm bells go off like crazy when I hear those kind of statements. Not just about Buddhism, but about anything. Anyone who tells you, don't look anywhere else, just look here. I'm the only one who knows. That person is selling you something. Maybe their reasons are honorable, maybe not. But I don't believe anything truly self-experiential, true to oneself, can be accrued, understood, imagined, or experienced without we ourselves going through our own personal gauntlet, if you will, our own personal insights and ahas. Then we truly trust what we know, because we can base it on our own experiential mind. We don't have to take someone's word for it, because nobody's experience is exactly the same. And Shakyamuni says this. Study broadly all of the scholarship. Over and over and over again, this goes through my mind. So, of course, yes, I understand the Lotus Sutra is the pinnacle of the teachings. But there are some things said in the Lotus Sutra, some things said in Nichiren's writings that beg for deeper understandings. If I just casually read over some term and I think, well, I'll know this intellectually, but I won't know this in my heart. I won't have experienced the truth of this because I really don't know the truth of that until I go dig. And when I dig, it takes me to other sutras, other commentaries, and I read what they say, those documents say, and they offer me a tremendous amount of insight and perspective on what is meant by a simple word or phrase. So that then when I bring that to my study of Nichiren's doctrine and the Lotus Sutra, oh, yes, of course, now I get it. Now it's true for me. How could you have total confidence and determination to invoke your Buddhahood if part of you is saying, well, I'll just do it this way and fake it till you make it? Maybe that works for some people, but it doesn't work for me. If I'm faking it, I even need to know what it is I'm faking. Do you see what I'm saying? I need to know deeply within my life experience. That's what gives me strength. That's what gives me conviction. That's what makes me know that now I'm invoking Buddha. It also means I have an expectation. If you don't have an expectation of enlightenment, what are we doing? In support of this, Grandmaster Tendai stated in his profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra, quote, when attempting to spread various sutras other than the Lotus Sutra, the essential part of the teaching will not be lost, even if a doctrinal analysis of all the teachings of the Buddha is not rendered. When attempting to spread the Lotus Sutra, however, the essence of the teaching may be lost if a doctrinal analysis is not made. End quote. What does that mean? You chant every day. You read your Lotus Sutra. You do Gangyo, in other words, recite. But you never really bother to understand in your mind, for yourself, for your life, what it is this behavior is actually manifesting, how it's working with your karma, how it's altering your state of being. You're just doing it because your friends are doing it, because it's fun, because it's something to do, because it makes you feel good. But you can't be bothered to study and get, more nitty gritty into how this all works. That's just takes too much time. Okay. And that's obviously how you're going to influence the people around you. And so ultimately, people will just practice because it's fashionable. And when people have crises, or when their lives turn to shit and they don't understand why or what to do about it, I chant every day. Why is this happening? It's because you don't understand. And in that, Tendai is saying that that's a sure path for the teaching to be lost, because it'll lose its effectiveness. It won't be a real tangible thing. For this practice to survive, its alchemical properties, I hate to use that word, but do you know what I mean? Until you can actually understand deeply, with confidence, how karma shifts, changes, is influenced, and how your life and your behavior and your attitudes and intents are the ship, the icebreaker that gets through all of this, good, bad, ugly, pretty, whatever, not relevant, then you are subject to the vicissitudes of samsara. So you must understand deeply. You must do more than simply play along. It's not enough. It is preached in the Lotus Sutra, chapter 2, in the Expedients. Although the Buddhas expound various teachings, it is for the purpose of leading the people into the world of the one Buddha vehicle, the Lotus Sutra. Various teachings here refers to all the pre-Lotus Sutras. Quote, for the purpose of leading the people into the world of the one Buddha vehicle, quote, end quote, means to expound all the scriptures of Buddhism to reveal the Lotus Sutra. You study in order to understand the profundity of self-manifestation, of self-realization. Yeah. I don't say in Gongyo, I don't say self-realization, because that can be interpreted as realizing the self. That's not what we're doing. Right? We're emancipating the self and manifesting Buddha. That's different. Question. Various sutras other than the Lotus Sutra adapt their doctrines and merits to the caliber of particular types of beings, such as bodhisattvas, gods, sharakas, or prataka Buddhas. For whom is the Lotus Sutra preached? End quote. The Lotus Sutra is difficult to understand for anyone except those to whom the Dharma is transmitted. This Lotus Sutra was expounded for all living beings in the 10 realms, including both wicked and virtuous, and wise and unwise, those who keep precepts and those who do not, male and female, 4 kinds of Buddhist devotees, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, and the 8 kinds of supernatural beings, gods, dragons, yakshas, devils, Gandharvas, heavenly musicians, Ashuras, Garuda, golden winged birds, Kinnamara, heavenly musician, I already did that one, and Mahoraga, boas. Basically, the Lotus Sutra is for any sentient being, anyone who can self-actualize, yeah? The so-called wicked people refer to such people as Devadatta, wonderful adornment king, and Ajatasatru king. Virtuous people refer to such gods and men as Queen Vaidehi. A wise man is Shariputra, while an unwise man is Kudapantaka. Those who keep the precepts refer to Shravaka and Bodhisattvas, while those who do not are dragons and other animals. The female means a dragon girl. See, these are all personages, mental states, people in different degrees of process, of the life process, and their mental cognitions and perceptions and experiences as described in all the sutras. Whether they're expedient or, as the dragon girl, finally coming to her enlightenment in the Lotus Sutra. It's not the first time she's introduced, but in general, living beings of the 10 realms all perceive the teaching of the one Buddha vehicle expounded in the perfect teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Scholars who do not understand this say, quote, the Lotus Sutra is not the teaching for us ordinary people, right? We've heard that before. This is indeed awful and against the true intent of the Buddha, as I continuously remind us. The Lotus Sutra achieves what Siddhartha Gautama set out to do. The Lotus Sutra was his goal. Even if he didn't perceive how to teach it at the time, that's where he was going. How do we live this life fully and emancipate ourselves, liberate ourselves from the conditions that create our suffering, our pain, our anxiety, our stress? Why do we always have to have that as a component of this life process? Do we have to have that? That was the original question. And it took many years of hardships and meditations and practices for him to discover, oh, it's all in the mind. It's how we experience. Not with our bodies, but with our minds. That's the key. Click. And he teaches how all of us can turn that key in the Lotus Sutra. That's the accomplishment of his initial goal. One more paragraph, and then we'll close. The teacher of the Dharma chapter of the Lotus Sutra preaches, quote, the highest and most perfect enlightenment that all bodhisattvas should attain is expounded only in this sutra. Can't be more plain than that. The bodhisattvas in this passage refer to living beings in the 9 realms. It means that all people, virtuous or wicked, male or female, Sharaka, Pratyeka Buddha, and I've spilled that. Anyway, and bodhisattvas in the Tripitaka teachings, the 3 vehicles, Sravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, and bodhisattvas in the common teachings, the bodhisattvas in the distinct teaching, and the bodhisattvas in the perfect teaching of the pre-Lotus Sutras must depend on the power of the Lotus Sutra for becoming Buddhas. So he just called out every other sect, not sect specifically, because sects adopt certain sutras, but then they add their own spins and opinions. And he's talking about the sutras themselves, the teachings themselves, right? The four doctrines, the 5 periods, all of those defined mental states, all of them at some point must reach the self-practice of Lotus Sutra in order to experience Buddhahood. This life, liberated, emancipated from the stress and the sufferings, right? The same chapter also preaches, quote, Medicine King, know this, that although many laymen or monks will practice the way of bodhisattvas, They will not be able to practice it satisfactorily unless they see, hear, read, recite, copy, or keep this sutra of the lotus flower of the wonderful Dharma, or make offerings to it, end quote. This obviously means that though the bodhisattva practice of the 6 bodhisattva practices and the 4 great vows, through the expedient practices of the Tripitaka teachings, taking 300 asamkaya kalpas, the common teaching taking numerous dust particle kalpas, and the distinct teaching taking numerous asamkaya kalpa, they practice neither the right practices of bodhisattva nor meritorious good acts until they reach the Lotus Sutra. It is obvious that they cannot become Buddhas because they do not practice the right way of bodhisattva. Wham! So, is this a statement that says this is the Nichiren sect? Or is this Nichiren simply saying, these are the words of Shakyamuni? What are we practicing, if not Shakyamuni's one great vehicle for manifesting our Buddha nature, our Buddha mind? Again, Nichiren isn't saying, this is my Buddhism. This is how I am interpreting the teachings of Shakyamuni. Therefore, follow Nichiren Buddhism. Nichiren never said that. He's always saying, look, what Shakyamuni is saying, it's quite abundantly clear. If you're trying to follow Shakyamuni's Buddhism, if you want to be a Buddha, which is Shakyamuni's teaching, then do as he says. It's quite clear. This is why he's our mentor. This is why he's a great bodhisattva. His life was dedicated to making sure that we understood correctly Shakyamuni's teachings. He didn't change them. He didn't invent something around them. He's a purist. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Please take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. Keep your practice strong. Increase your confidence every day. Thank you for liking, subscribing specifically. Leave comments. Comments are really helpful to keep the algorithms alive. Yeah. And those of you who support financially through Patreon or directly through paypal.me/Sifu Sylvain, absolutely invaluable. Every time I get validation of domain name or website paid or any, I'm always chanting to you folks, because you're keeping this place alive. You're keeping the electricity on in here. So thank you. And we will continue. We're not done with this one yet. It's pretty beefy. So I'll see you in the next one, okay? Take care of yourselves, please. Bye for now.